How long does probate take? That's the question we're going to be talking about in today's video. And unfortunately, there is no simple answer. I have seen some probate cases get done relatively smoothly and in a short period of time, and others have lingered on, which has been very frustrating for some families. Here's the thing, probate is not a single event, it's a process, and there's a number of factors that can affect that process. So today I'm going to take you through the probate process and hopefully give you some tools and tips of things that you can do to hopefully negate your family from going through some unnecessary delays. So let me get my notebook out here so we can start going through these points. Point number one is going to be most people underestimate how long it's really going to take. Just know at the minimum it's going to take several months. I think what happens is families get kind of frustrated and they focus in on the individual tasks like cleaning out the home, getting the home on the market. I wrote some other things down, gathering the paperwork. I just said selling the property, but there's legal requirements that are involved. And I think that kind of gets put on the back burner a little bit when you're dealing with all these other tasks at hand. So just know that there's going to be some legal requirements determined by the timeline, not how active the family is working to get things done. Okay, point number two, what actually happens during probate? I'm going to have to refer to my notes here quite a bit. God did not bless me with a mind to be able to memorize things quite that well. So here we go. So I think most people really do think that it's going to be pretty simple, like, hey, we've got the will, we're going to go ahead and disperse the assets. But here's what you need to consider for the probate process. It includes filing the probate case with the courts. The courts are then going to appoint a personal representative or an executor. It's the same thing. It's just different states refer to it a little differently. Identifying the heirs and the beneficiaries, notifying the creditors, gathering and valuing all the assets, paying debts, taxes, and expenses for the estate, selling assets if necessary, distributing remaining assets, and then closing the estate. Each of those steps is going to take time, and many steps must happen in a very specific order. So don't rush yourself and skip a step, because that may end up delaying you even further, because then you have to go back and redo something and then start that whole process all over again. So listen to that point right there. Okay, point number three, creditor deadlines often really do surprise families. So I did a video a couple weeks ago on the obligations of an executor, and I kind of went over this section a little bit, and I was very vague on timelines. I did say 60 days. However, after doing a little bit more research, I've learned that every state has different requirements. So here in Arizona, if you mail something to the creditors to let them know that this person has passed away, they have 60 days to respond with whether or not any money is owed from the estate to that particular creditor. However, you still want to publish something in like a newspaper or something along those regards. I would check with your probate attorney to find out where exactly they'd prefer everything published. And then that opens up the door for other creditors that maybe you did not mail things to also respond, and that can take several more months. And again, it depends on the state. I think New York's got the biggest timeline. I think there's a 7 months. I don't know why. Their population isn't even nearly as big as California's, and their timelines are way less than that. In the meantime, you have a house that needs to be sold, you have bills that need to be paid, and the family's ready to receive their inheritance. However, there are certain waiting periods per state, per probate court, and you're going to need to abide by the laws of your particular state. Number four, what causes probate delays? Well, I'm glad you asked. Number one can be those lovely family disputes. All of those wonderful conversations we have with the loved ones that always think they're right, but sadly, that's probably the number one thing that causes delays, is those family disputes. People can't seem to figure out, this person wants to sell the house, this one doesn't, that sort of thing. Also, will contestments. I was on a call the other day with some other real estate colleagues. So that's what I do. I'm a real estate agent here in Arizona. I help families just like you, help you sell the property that's involved in the estate. And these agents are from all over the country. We're all in the same niche, I guess you could say, where we like to help families. And this call is almost kind of like a support group of how we can talk through some things. But anyway, one gentleman on the call this last week mentioned that he sat next to a person at the courthouse the other day who had been, their probate had been tied up for 4 years because of a will contest. So yeah, 4 years. Can you imagine the bill for the attorneys just for that? That's bananas. Anyway, so you got your family disputes, your will contests, and then missing documents, difficulty locating some of the assets. Sometimes when people get older, they start hiding stuff just out of paranoia. So sometimes you can have difficulty locating those. And then of course, there's your normal legal stuff like tax issues, court backlogs. Courts can get backed up sometimes depending on the month or the year. Business interests, and of course, if there's real estate that needs to be sold in the property. So that is going to be our next step, is the real estate often adds time. And it's not your fault. You've gone about doing all the things you need to do to get your house prepped and ready to go on the market. However, then you're dealing with the market. This is why it's really important that you probably talk to a real estate professional. You can call myself here in Arizona, or if you need help locating an agent in your market, let me know. I'm happy to make that introduction for you. But anyway, if you have an inherited home, there's going to be some components involved. First of all, we already know that that's the biggest asset for your estate. So it's going to be really important that if the wishes of your loved one was to sell the estate and use that as an investment, it could take some time depending on the market that you're in. It may need to be cleaned out first. There may be some repairs that need to be completed even before you go on the market. And of course, there's those family disagreements about whether or not we should keep the house or let somebody move into the house that's a loved one. I did a video on that one too. And whether or not to sell the home. So then the property needs to be listed and it needs to be marketed. And then it's going to depend on market conditions. So like here in Arizona, for instance, once those interest rates got in the mid 6s or whatever, the central area of Phoenix, for instance, not a problem. People kind of moved interior, but all those outskirts areas like Buckeye, Surprise, Queen Creek, those cities that are on the exterior of the valley, those are going to take a little bit longer. So it's really important that you start working with your real estate agent and find out, okay, how many days on the market are we going to expect? And so that's just part of it. And then once you do go under contract, do know that that buyer has to do their due diligence. They're going to need to have their inspections. And if they are getting financing, there's going to be a loan involved, and that could take 30 to 45 days for closing. Okay, point number 6, what can families do to help? First of all, you need to be organized and you need to make sure you keep good records. You need to respond to your attorney promptly. So when you start this process and you, this is some really good advice, and I highly recommend this, that you set up a separate email account just for the estate. So let's say it's Aunt Betty Estate at Gmail or Yahoo or whatever.com. That you will check on a regular basis. In my line of work, when I sit down with a client, the first thing I ask them is like, hey, can I get your email address that you're actually going to check? We all have 2, sometimes 3 email addresses. One we use for all the stuff that we sign up for or the shopping that we do online because we don't want the normal emails. We want all the normal emails that we want on a regular basis to come to this account and all the other stuff to go to that account. So it's really important that you, when you're talking to the attorney, is to make sure you have an email address that you are going to check on a regular basis and to respond to them promptly. They are very busy individuals. So if you don't get back to them promptly, it could then lag even longer for them to get back in touch with you. Gather financial information early. So the earlier you can start gathering documents, the better.